Namaste, viewers. Welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA and Jaipur Dialogue. Today's show is all about the 2024 upcoming elections, both in India and the USA. We'll straightway dive into. But before that, please like, subscribe, press the bell icon, and support Jaipur Dialogue and Jaipur Dialogue USA. We are brothers and sisters in the race together. So, with this, I wanted to welcome a rather unique combination today of Abhijit Iyer Mitra and Sham Sharma शो के बिल्कुल चालक शर्मा जी, आप दोनों का स्वागत है.
Namaskar.
बहुत धन्यवाद बहुत धन्यवाद
Namaskar, and thank you for having us on. And it's great to meet you for the first time, Vibhuti ji.
That's right. It's a first time meeting, and thanks to Abhijit to introduce us both together. And I'm very happy you consented to join.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So let's dive into the entire thing. So I don't want to talk about who is going to win. That is an open question as of now. But what I wanted to talk to you and discuss is what is the impact and implication of whoever wins, whether Republicans come back under a new leadership, or Mr. Trump or Mr. Modi wins, or the Mahagathbandhan under the leadership of AAP comes in. What will be the impact and implication of this kind of a thing in 2024? It's very rare that India and US are going into election together at the same time.
Yeah.
So, iska impact and implication kya hai? That's one. Number two is the fact that how is it going to shape up the things in the future with reference to the fact that हमारी dreams जो हैं, India की जो dream है विश्व गुरु होने की, is it going to realize under whose banner? Shamji, you are on the first time on the show. I want you to kick off.
I mean, yeah, you're right. It is tricky to know who's going to win. It is tricky to know who's even going to run. The Biden's policy towards India has been fairly confused as far as I can tell. Trump's policy towards any country, India notwithstanding, was very transactional. So it was very easy to know how to work with Trump. And I think eventually Modi started to figure that out as well. Like, working with Trump was actually fairly simple. You give him something, he'll give you something. Scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Depending on who runs from the Republican side, is it going to be DeSantis, which it looks likely that it's going to be him. How DeSantis will be towards India will also going to be interesting to see. Abhijit is somebody who can obviously speak a lot better about these matters than I can, like who is going to be better for India. As far as the dreams of being a Vishwaguru being realized, I do believe that it has less to do with India's partnership with the United States and more to do with what India is able to do within its own borders. We can obviously bring up plenty of decisions by the current administration in the last 4 or 5 years where I'm a voter, मैं तो उनके लिए vote भी करता हूँ, I'm a supporter, but at the same time, I feel like it's often been a policy of, one step forward, one step back. You take the decision, this landmark decision in Kashmir, but then some of the actions post the abrogation of Article 370, it feels like it's, the state is either stagnant or moving backwards. It's the same with CAA. It's the same with a lot of other directions that have been taken. So I don't know how much, India's relationship with the United States is contingent on that rather than if India can just start to get out of its own way.
Thank you very much for your wonderful opening. And Abhijit, I'll come back to that very question. One step forward, 2 steps back, or 2 steps forward, or 1 step back. Is India an authentic leadership material, or are we a traditional great followers, or watching by the sidelines? We always clap, cry, moan, and bemoan things happening. So we use our wisdom to analyze more than lead. Do you think India has a chance to be a leader in the world, the way China has established its position, or the way United States is? You are silent, can't hear you.
I think you might be muted again, Abhijit. Are you?
Yes.
Oh,
Can't
no,
hear
I
you.
think you might need to just pop back out and come back in.
No, you are still, your sign shows muted, but you are not, voice is not
I
coming.
think,
Okay.
yeah,
So
sometimes it
before,
happens on
yeah.
the
So
app.
take
Yeah.
the same question to you, because I
Hmm.
wanted to hear the points of view of both of
Hmm.
you. Yeah. The same question.
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
there you
Yes,
go.
yes. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect.
Welcome
So,
back.
see, my thing is, if India ever starts leading, it's not going to be in my lifetime. Possibly in none of your lifetimes either. We haven't been a leader for about the last 1,000 years or so, or even more, perhaps. Like my friend Sushant Sareen says, in 732 AD, we invented the zero, and we were so enamored by it that we decided to collectively reduce ourselves as a nation to zero. So, that was the last great invention to come out of India. The problem, I'll tell you, is what? We have a lot of aspirations, but we never have the ways and means to get to those aspirations. If you look, the Prime Minister in his Independence Day speech laid the path for 2047, which is going to be 100th year of independence. And there were lots of beautiful sounding words out there. There were wonderful ideas. But the actual actions on the ground and the plans to realize it, non-existent. Garibi Hatao, Roti Kapda Makan, these were also very beautiful slogans that Indira Gandhi and co came up with. Sadly, Indira Gandhi wasn't. Today, what you find is that the regulatory mechanism is as stifling and oppressive as Indira Gandhi's license Raj was once upon a time. The control was done differently then. Today, it's done through different means, but it's essentially going back to the same thing. And we're going back towards a, almost to a uniparty state like we were under the Congress, because it does not seem to me that any party is going to rise in any form or fashion to be able to challenge the BJP, at least for the next the next election cycle, but maybe even the next 2-3 election cycles. It took 1977 before an opposition, so that was what, 30 years after independence, for an opposition government to emerge. And I think once the BJP rose in 2014, it's just been going from strength to strength, and you're going to see literally no opposition, worthwhile opposition to it, till it's about another 20 to 30 years at least. This is part one. So the BJP is definitely winning. The second part of this is what happens in America. I think America, the social schism is far worse than India. In India, you have, let's say, a minority versus majority divide, where the majority is about some 80-85%. In America, it's a split right down the middle. I think the very soul of America is damaged, where there's extreme regional polarization, where the two coasts are very liberal and the center is not. Interpret liberal any way you want. In addition to that, even in urban concentrations, you see extreme polarization of the polity, to the point where every I won't call it extremist, I'd say ideologically pure stance is what is seen. And if you're not ideologically pure in the Republican Party, you're called a rhino, so Republican in name only. And if you're in the Democrat Party, like say Tulsi Gabbard, you're called a traitor and a Republican. So, this is becoming a huge problem in America. I suspect, given how bad things are right now, the Republicans will take the midterms. I suspect they will win again. Could it be under Trump? I really don't know. But I think this week's raid at Mar-a-Lago has really propelled quite a bit for President Trump. I think everybody gets, I think Americans generally have a sense of fair play. And they see nothing was done to Hillary Clinton, even though she had troves and troves of classified emails. And what was done to Trump for having the same classified emails or documents, as the case may be. This is part two. But part three is more important. Generally, you will find foreign governments not including Europe, prefer working with Republican administrations. In Australia, for example, Australia's ties with America are always best when Republican governments are in charge. There are lots of countries like this, Japan, Singapore, Korea. All of these countries generally seem to prefer Republican governments in America. The only countries that seem to prefer democratic governments, Democrat government in America are the Europeans. Because, there, even what is called an ultra-right in Europe would be a raging leftist in America. Their worst right-wingers in Europe are like center-left in America. So there's, because the center's moved so far left in Europe. So, you have this general issue of either Republican or Democrat. Because of the polarization, they're going to end up damaging one set of relationships or another set of relationships.
Well, that's fascinating to hear. And coming back to the same topic, Shamji, that Trump is a very polarizing individual. He has had his own beautiful run. I consider his term as great for the country. And the question here is very important. Is the Democratic Party trying to entice, lure, and trap Trump into midterm elections? Because the failure or the mismanagement of this current regime is so apparent that even Democrats are annoyed with the rising prices, and you create conditions where the gas prices go up so much, then you reduce by 5 cents, and then you say, see, we are lowering the price.
Yeah.
So there is a greater dissatisfaction amongst the people. And as Abhijit rightly pointed out, there is a clear sign of a red wave coming up. Do you think that Democrats will ride behind the fact that Trump is becoming the candidate? He's being lured into the trap. And is he falling into that trap? What do you think is the impact and implication of that thing happening?
It does appear to be that way because it feels like maybe the Democrats feel that if Trump was the overwhelming nominee from the right, then the Democrats could probably take the Republicans. If they ran with like a DeSantis or somebody else combo, the Democrats feel that, Biden is obviously not up to scratch. I think it's clear as day. And what most Americans are even more frightened of than Biden is Kamala Harris. So people are hoping, as much as people don't like Biden, people are hoping and praying every single day that Biden survives the term, because literally nobody, not even Democrats, outside of maybe San Francisco, want Kamala Harris as the president of the United States. So I think they might be trying to lure it or, turn the elections into a Trump versus the Democrats fight. So then they can point out to Trump and January 6th, they can point out to Trump and the coronavirus and, try to win the election basing it all around Trump. That could be a strategy. How well it would work, I really don't know, because at least at the moment, the two clear front runners for the Democratic Party are overwhelmingly uninspiring.
And that particular reason, that overwhelmingly uninspiring, is my thought. Abhijit, your thoughts on this subject matter, that potentially they may play a game, because Kamala ji is not a winner. Idli or no idli, she is not going to be a winner. The point of the matter is the fact that they may want to ease her off and bring California governor Gavin Newsom or somebody else, or Pete Buttigieg for the matter, to present a new face, with Kamala ji failing so badly. Your thought on that? Is it possible?
So I think they'll play anything except Kamala. Because, I don't think there's a single Indian except her own family who likes Kamala either.
No,
Have you ever seen
big money? They are very fond of Kamala ji, by the way.
No, in the Bay Area, of course, they'll donate to Kamala.
The Bay Area, but let's not talk about Bay Area. You see, Bay Area there's so much drugs going around there. The crystal meth, the brains are all addled. There's crystal meth in the water out there. So let's leave Bay Area aside. let's talk about real America. You find me one Indian American association that has been enthusiastic about her. Right? Zero.
I know
None.
of, yeah.
None. So imagine how horrible you must be that being the first Indian American to rise to the vice presidency of the United States, no Indian American even wants to acknowledge. And this is a country that is desperate for validation about Indian Americans. You know, some Indian American kills his wife by chopping her into 16 bits. Yeah, Indian. See, Indian. I told you he's an Indian. Some Indian gets the Nobel Prize even though he has no connection to India, would just have an Indian name. See, Indian, everything Indian. Do you remember that entire skit, the Kumars at number 42?
Yeah.
Where
Santa
the
Claus
dad
is
used
Indian.
to always say, Shakespeare is Indian, Santa Claus is Indian, everybody's Indian, that kind of thing. Imagine for a culture like that, when you mention Kamala Harris, they're like, no, thank you very much. I mean, they wouldn't touch her with a barge pole. That is how toxic the woman is. Right, so it's not going to be Kamala. The problem is Biden is going to have several negatives, especially after the tapes. See, nobody's talking about the Hunter Biden tapes. Everybody is talking about inflation as if inflation is the only source of negative votes and things like that. Things like Hunter Biden also have a severe impact. There are recordings of him saying that my dad will do whatever I tell him to do. He owes it to me because of his guilt conscience of, leaving me to hang. He doesn't mention why, but leaving him to become a druggie or the first son getting killed or whatever. So this is something they have to bring in a vice presidential candidate who lessens Joe Biden's negatives. That person is not Kamala Harris. Pete Buttigieg, maybe. I do think he might be the optimal candidate, given the pandering required to wokes. To have the first gay vice president might be a positive, but I don't think it's going to be him. I think it's going to be some unknown contender.
You don't think it's going to be Newsom?
Because probably not even him. I suspect it's going to be some DNC insider because what they will want is a particularly corrupt deal maker for their own ends. The Republicans have become ideological, the Democrats have become corrupt. That's the negative of both of them. I think MAGA has kind of, even though MAGA may not be the Republican Party, it is now a very powerful force, like the Tea Party was. Do you remember the Tea Party once upon a time with Sarah Palin and all of that? It has to satiate more than just play lip service to MAGA's ideals, drain the swamp, etc., which can be very difficult. So even if DeSantis becomes president, for him to drain the swamp, he's going to have to piss off the entire Washington establishment, which expects the gravy train to go around. And he might not be able to do that, and he will consequently, the establishment will turn on him. Remember, most of the hatred of Trump was because nobody got jobs.
Yeah.
Right. So everybody decides, the Republicans decide, oh, he's not really a Republican, etc., people like Liz Cheney and co. Poor Liz Cheney, she's lost her seat. She's not going to get anything anymore. Boo-hoo-hoo. Can you see my tears, copious tears falling for Liz Cheney at the moment? Good riddance, daughter of a war criminal.
Yeah.
Hope she croaks and dies. And then you have the Democrats, who are absolutely corrupt to the core, ideologically corrupt, morally corrupt in every sense of the word. And they've got an ideological problem, which is, what is wokeism? It's essentially institutionalized extortion. Okay, it's inventing grievances of all kinds so that you can take state property onto yourself. And that's perfectly fine, except, you get to the stage where the Congress party is in India, because it becomes a cabal of the mediocrity. Initially, the people, remember, the Black Lives Matter founder is very smart. She's monetized it, gone from being a penurious nobody, good for nothing, into owning 3 mansions, one in the Bahamas, 2 in Los Angeles, and God knows what not else. But are the followers that smart? I doubt that very much. And herein lies the problem of demagoguery. Once you activate the zombies, you're going to have zombie apocalypse. So best of luck to the Democrats.
As a Republican candidate, your words are music to my ears, and I am definitely, excited by that. But the other part that comes up out of this particular thing that you said, Abhijit, is that in the United States, Sharmaji, share your thoughts on this particular aspect, that how the Democratic Party, it drives itself on agendas. They have no policies. I've tried to figure it out. They have no policies, but they have definite agenda, and they follow their agenda with all their might, all the manipulation, and they create divisiveness behind what Abhijit was telling, of creating, certain segments of the people. So they keep everybody frustrated and unhappy, and keep pandering on that part of it. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the single point agenda of the Democratic Party has essentially turned into, identity politics. Identity politics and the same old sort of war crimes of the United States overseas. But at least at home, it really got crystallized when I think it was Biden who came out and said, when they were trying to appoint a Supreme Court judge, that he came out and said that it is going to be a black woman, or he said like woman of color. I think that's what he said. And when your idea or your candidate for a position, such an important position in your country, you're deciding that first and foremost about based on certain racial characteristics or physical characteristics rather than the qualifications of the person, you're already in trouble. But I'm sure that you saw that all the liberal newspapers, all the big tent media in the United States, and all major liberal commentators all around the United States were just, clapping their hands together like seals on a beach about what a wonderful and courageous decision that Biden has taken. Now, that might play very well in New York, that might play very well in LA and San Francisco, but it does not play very well in the rest of the country. I'm not saying the rest of the country has a problem with a black female Supreme Court judge, but they have a problem if that becomes your basically sole criteria for nominating a candidate to such an important position. And you see examples of that everywhere. You see examples of that where Republicans in very key purple states like Virginia are able to use something like CRT to actually win elections, to actually convert a decent chunk of the Asian vote, including the Indian vote. You know, uh, what's the gentleman's name? That's the governor. I think, is it Virginia where Youngkin is?
Yes,
Youngkin, Virginia? Yeah.
yes, yes.
So Youngkin was able to, turn CRT into a very strong political tool, and he was able to, pull a lot of the Asian vote because of that. And so even right now, like if you look at Kamala Harris's choice as well, it was very clearly to check off certain identity politics boxes that the Biden administration wanted to do. And the more they lean into it, the worse it will keep on getting for them. The problem, at least for me, if I'm being honest, is that what Abhijit said, I completely agree with, that the Republicans seem to have become a lot more ideological, and they're handing certain victories or certain agenda points to the Democrats on a plate, particularly when it comes to the abortion ruling, and also with the Republicans, with a giant chunk of the Republicans sort of voting, quote unquote, against the LGBTQ marriage thing. I understand that there's other provisions within that law or within that thing that they did not want to vote for, and hence they ended up voting no against the whole thing. But then they provide these little victories or these little big agenda points for the Democrats in the upcoming midterms. I don't think it will be enough to be able to stop the red tide, but we'll see.
That's wonderful. This brings me to the other point which you said, that Republicans have a tendency to give victory,
Mm.
little victories, and I sometimes I find a very interesting similarity between Republican Party and Hindus in India, is that we know how to grab defeat from the jaws of victory. So, so that's something which is very critical for the ideological part of it. But Abhijit, one question comes up back on the Indian side of the story. There were certain Times of India report and other places that AAP is presenting itself as to be the alternative to BJP, and they may or may not be part of the Maha Thag Maha Ghanta Bandhan, as we call it, as we call it. Do you see that emerging, or India will suffer the curse of satrap mentality in India? How will the 2024 shape up on that count? Each
Look,
one a
I'm not, but
pound of flesh, so to say.
I'm not particularly worried about AAP, because under AAP, their one big state, Punjab, is going to blow up in another round of insurgency. I think if you thought the last round of insurgency in Punjab was bad, it's nothing compared to what has effectively already started, but is going to blow up. It is going to happen during the AAP's chief ministership, because they've done everything on the ground to encourage it and support it and fester it and blow it up. I think up. The question is, will it blow up before 2024 to discredit AAP with everybody else? Because remember, once those Khalistani terrorists get on the prowl, they are going to do what they did through the 80s, which was drag non-turbaned Hindus and other non-turban people out of trains and machine gun them down. Right, that is the hallmark of the Punjab insurgency, and that is what is going to happen, which is going to turn everybody else against AAP, unless AAP manages to control things, which they won't, of course, because they want to continue having power in Punjab. So, I don't think AAP is going to be very credible out there. Remember, they tried this stunt before. They tried this stunt in several different states. They never managed to grow. They only managed to grow where there's an extreme sense of persecution complex and victimhood, which was Punjab in this case, which technically is an extension of Delhi. I mean, let's not forget, Delhi was a part of Punjab in a sense. Haryana was a part of Punjab. It was all divided as per the linguistic division and things like that, more than the linguistic division, really. When was it, in the 60s or whatever? The Indian Punjab was divvied up effectively. So it's. I don't think AAP is I don't think AAP is going anywhere. Let's put it that way. Because remember, they've also managed to piss off a lot of the, the traditionalist, the traditional secularist intelligentsia, because AAP are opportunists. So if they see there's a buck to be gained through Hindutva and Hinduism and public displays of piety, they'll do that. They tried that during the Delhi elections. It paid off for them, remember? Yeah. So that doesn't exactly make things look very good for them. Their revenue sources are under severe strain. Because remember, this company OML was raided. What's it called? Out Mouth Loud, something like that. This guy called Vijay Nair or whatever, who incidentally is behind promoting Dhruv Rathi and things like that. Let me just find the name and the company. It's somewhere here. I can't seem to find it. Sorry. 1 second.
OML, is that an organization that funds AAP or something?
No, only much louder. They have this entire roster of comedians and things. They were the ones who got Dhruv Rathi his program. They promoted Dhruv Rathi, got him his program on this thing. This fellow Nair got a Sarkari Bangla in Delhi. Nobody spoke about it. He was behind all the payments made off to. They run AAP's PR. They also have these comedians like Atul Khatri and people like that on their roster, right?
Oh my God.
The big, the small, but overwhelmingly the mediocre. So what ends up happening, they got raided. So the financial screws are going to tighten. And remember, AAP is an extraordinarily corrupt party. So there are lots of ways in which AAP can be controlled, and I don't worry about them. But going back to America, what Sham said was very important. Indian Americans in the Bay Area went there to escape all your reservation related, what they believe is reservation related crap. Only to land up and vote for more reservation where they landed up. And I sure as hell hope that all their kids, despite getting 98, 99%, do not get college admissions and end up selling bananas on roadside carts. That would be true poetic justice. The first generation lands up in America, becomes tech entrepreneurs. Second generation sells bananas and scoops shit out of San Francisco public drains. I really wish that on all their kids. Their kids should go through that. It's karma.
That's the karmic part is very important, and I want to piggyback on the same thought again that while BJP, like Republican Party, they know how to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. AAP and the rest of them are like Democratic Party, doing things for free. That's a remarkable tactical effort in which you offer things for free and people fall for it. That's the reason why Arvind Kejriwal still continues with that canard, not realizing, that's why you said about shortage of funds and fundraising. They are trying to be desperate about offering things for free, and God knows who will pay for it. The question is, who will pay for it? That is, Sham, I wanted to come to you, that is America driving itself up the bankruptcy ladder? Because the debt to revenue ratio, GDP ratio is so high in America. If that was my ratio, we will get no money. No credit card company will give us credit. No car company will give us any credit, right? At some point in time, that bubble ought to burst. It will burst at some point in time. Whether it happens because of de-dollarization or whether it happens because of the sanction as an instrument, it may be justified at some point in time, but at some point in time, it's going to boomerang, because nobody likes to be sanctioned by one person or one entity because you do not agree. How do you see this sanction thing eventually working against American interest? That's where you and I live, and it ought to be a matter of concern for us. Just one quick question. I wanted to tell all the audiences, please ask your questions, because you have two brilliant minds here. One question asked answers many people's praise. So ask your questions. It is open to super chat. And some people are commenting why Sanjay Dikshit ji is not here. He said that he is very tired. He has been on shows from 6 a.m. So let him have his rest, because he will follow again with ask me anything question. You can ask him why he didn't come on this show. So let's go on. So, Sham, you're all yours.
Yeah, sorry. Could you just repeat the question just one time for me?
That the free stuff that is become a political method to entice voters. We'll waive a student loan. We will give you this electricity free. This has a very bad situation in democratic system where there is more chaos than anything. It throws more chaos in the process.
Yeah, it is. I'm not the most well-versed person on this particular aspect, but I'm also somebody who actually is not completely opposed to like German or a Swedish model of the way they provide social services to their people.
I think he lost his connection. Abhijit, you can jump on the same question, whether the sanctions are going to hurt
when
America
it comes to
more.
Oh, did I freeze up?
Yeah, you did freeze up.
Yeah, you froze up.
Oh, sorry. It just sometimes my internet just like cuts out for like a second, but it comes right back.
Good.
But the issue I feel like is, when they talk about like waiving all student loans willy-nilly, it's almost kind of a little bit of treating the symptom, but not really the underlying problem. And the underlying problem is, why are university costs in the United States so exorbitant? So you have AOC who's talking about, okay, please, I make $500,000 a year, but please waive my student loans. I can't pay $17,000 or whatever her, outstanding loans are. And when you're talking about that, you're also, I think it's incumbent upon you to talk about why the costs of university is increasing, why the costs of, medical costs are so high in the United States, why are housing costs so high in the United States. So we're not solving any of those underlying issues, but we're only offering solutions to the symptoms that we see as a result of those underlying issues. Why are administrators making so much money in colleges? Why am I paying $50,000 for 2 semesters of college in the United States? Like, those are the questions that need to be asked, but none of those questions are being addressed. And so, ठीक है, we can continue to waive college loans as till the cows come home, but that's not really going to solve the problem. Like you said, Vibhuti ji, it's going to keep adding to the debt. And people already see through it. To be honest, there's a decent, for people that live here, I think you can realize it, that there's a decent chunk of people on the right and on the left that are actually starting to see through the whole game slowly. They are the real quote unquote woke people. These are the people that are now waking up and realizing that whether it's the Republicans, whether it's the Democrats, a lot of the problems that have existed in the country for a very long time, neither side is solving. And I feel like that was one of the big reasons for the whole MAGA movement in the first place, because they're like, we're unhappy with either party, and that is why we want Trump, because he's going to burn the entire system down, and then we can build a fresh system on top of it. Now, Trump was not able to accomplish that because the system is very deep, extremely rotted, and both the parties are essentially working together. And so it was very difficult for Trump to do that. Whether he'll be able to, whether another politician, another extremely charismatic leader is able to do that in the future, it remains to be seen. But I think in a lot of people are realizing in the United States slowly that what they're facing is not a race problem. What they're facing is not an ideological problem. What they're facing is a class problem. It's a class of these extremely privileged politicians in Washington and essentially in the coastal areas, and essentially the rest of America. That's the real problem that exists in America right now.
I will come to you, Abhijit. He's given a very wonderful prescription that we are not addressing the deep root causes of something. And as I work in my work, we always address the question to the CEOs: do you want to solve the problem? If you don't want to solve the problem, then everything is cosmetic. Sanctions,
But
US imposing sanction on others, is it going to boomerang on the United States? And your thoughts on that, because countries are uniting, are becoming different. They are looking at the US as the big bully. Is that true?
look, American sanctions and military action in Libya cost more American lives than, the American I won't say occupation, but what do you call it? The American pacification of Libya took up more lives than any military action that Gaddafi's Libya had ever taken against America. You see the same in Iraq. You see the same in Afghanistan, etc., etc., etc. This is now a chronic problem because it fuels what Eisenhower called that military-industrial complex. And it's a very addictive way of getting out of economic problems. Because remember, everybody attributes German and Japanese recovery to the Marshall Plan and things like that. It wasn't. It was actually the Korean War that sparked war demand that pushed Japan and Germany's recovery. So very similarly, there is this belief that war demand can constantly get you out of recession because you're spending money on things. And we all know that during recession, you do not do what was done during the Great Depression, where the government froze up spending. You spend your way out of a thing. But a 13:1 debt equity ratio is simply not sustainable. So they fall back on the second best option, which is sanctions. And the problem with sanctions, again, is, I think with Russia, America has realized the limit of the sanctions. Previously, they only used to sanction minor economies with minor global supply chain footprints. They were individually important to single products. So Iraq was very important to oil, right? Or Libya was very important to gas, but that was about it. What else came out of Libya? Nothing. What else came out of Iraq? Nothing. When you sanction a multi-product economy or a multi-commodities economy, it's not a multi-product, it's a multi-commodities economy like Russia, you begin to see what starts happening. And mind you, they've still not learned their lessons from all of this. What America is now doing in Ukraine, do you think Russia is going to sit by and allow another Libya or Iraq to happen without arming those people to the teeth with whatever the hell they want under the sun, including possibly nuclear weapons? Right? So I don't think they've really thought this through. I think what you're seeing in America is a lot of getting bogged down in tactical exigencies, completely ignoring the strategic picture. They still don't get why India is pissed off. Because for us, what is this desperate defense to save Europe, the idea of Europe, is for India an absolute nightmare because it's put Russia inevitably into China's no escape zone. Event horizon, through China's event horizon, from which there is no escape. And we're looking at complete continental encirclement, right? And then they have the gall to talk about an Asian pivot and how we're not losing focus on Russia to focus on China and things like that. Who's going to take you seriously? So there's a lot of stuff happening out here which is going to come to bite. I think the only, and the damage is permanent. This is not temporary damage, it's going to be permanent damage. The only respite, I think the only relief is the fact that China is harming itself a lot more, a lot quicker than America is at the moment.
That's a very powerful statement, and I was coming to that, the China equation. Shamji, tell us one thing about it. Doesn't President Xi, who is now media calls, some people call him Zitler, doesn't he have the wisdom to see that he is making he himself, his country, Chinese Communist Party, and his own people as the worst group of people anywhere on the planet Earth? Nobody likes China anymore. They are the bully nation. US has become a sanction nation. And one of the areas in which US completely ignores, and that particular thing gets exposed, when you champion human rights and you do not impose sanctions on those countries that bring about human rights violations, and you always tickle or blame India for that, that becomes a very tricky issue. We live in an era where technology exposes the truth very quickly.
Yeah.
How do you see the China thing playing out in this scenario, in both in the US and India election? Mind you, it was Chinese COVID virus that virtually threw out all the leaders of the nations, including Mr. Trump, who challenged Xi's supremacy claims everywhere. Only Modi is standing in the way now. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, I'm unfortunately, I'm not really much of an expert on China as well. Abhijit is much better suited to answer this question, but I do get the sense that, China used to be the country that was very good at strengthening itself while the rest of the world sort of ignored it. It was very good at keeping its head down, doing the work, getting to a certain, economic and military strength while the rest of the world was just busy looking elsewhere. But it seems like China is a country now that has a level of strength where it can wait around or maybe use its strength in a better way or in a more effective way than it was able to before. But I think China's fallen into the trap, and maybe Abhijit can enlighten us better about why, but it seems like they've fallen into a trap that most sort of bullies fall into when they first realize that they're stronger than a lot of people around them, is that rather than use that strength in a restrained way for people to understand that you're strong and fear you, bullies feel the need to constantly throw that weight around, constantly intimidate people, constantly express that strength, where eventually the rest of the people around you will get sick of you and will realize that there is an extent to your strength, and that's what eventually takes the bully down. And it seems like China's falling into that trap a little bit with its constant, sort of abrasive actions against India and a lot of the countries in the South China Sea, Taiwan, a lot of the ASEAN countries as well. They're all getting a little bit sick of China. So um, I would love to hear what Abhijit thinks about why a country that was so mature about using its strength or about showing its hand to the rest of the world is so keen on suddenly showing it almost excessively.
Abhijit, your
It's the.
question has already been posed by Sharma ji. Go ahead.
Have you guys watched Legally Blonde?
Yeah, my wife made me watch it like just a few months ago.
It's a good. It's a good movie. Vibhuti ji, have you watched it?
Legally Blonde, yes.
Okay, good. So you will know that dumb blondes always get the man in the end.
Yep.
Because they may not be good at what you want them to be good at, but they're very good at getting the man. Okay. She is that classic character. Deng Xiaoping grew up during Mao's purges and things like that, and he understood what the problem with them was. So he went to extraordinary lengths to have checks and balances and whatnot after him. He moderated policy very, very carefully. He opened up things very carefully, etc., etc., etc. That generation of leadership generally stayed, except what is this thing budging? Yeah,
I don't think that's me. That might be. Are you on a phone?
A phone, but it
not
keeps
Are you on a phone, Abhijit?
नहीं मेरा phone है मेरा
Oh,
phone.
acha. They might need to just go on silent mode probably.
Now, there are two things that have happened since then. See, once your military starts gaining strength, remember the 5 dictums or the 5 modernizations of Deng Xiaoping. Military modernization came the last. And even then he said, carry a big stick, but walk very softly and quietly. Deng Xiaoping understood this. But the problem is, once your military starts growing, there becomes pressure from the military itself to start using the military as a tool. And it's a very attractive tool. So if a burglar comes into your house and you have a gun, you're not exactly going to be stuck up on morality or the fact that there are 4 burglars with AK-47s entering your house for you to pull out your gun. You're still going to be stupid. You're going to pull out your shotgun and probably get shot by one of them, maybe take down one of them, maybe not even that. So there is this sort of institutional push towards using the military and high-handedness and things like that, which is purely institutional. Deng Xiaoping should have foreseen it. He did not. Now, this has become a lot worse under Xi, because Xi is Reese Witherspoon. He's the Reese Witherspoon or the Rahul Gandhi of the real world. I mean, Reese Witherspoon, Rahul Gandhi, pretty much the same thing. But,
Listen, Reese Witherspoon in that film was a lot smarter than you're giving her credit for. I'm sorry, I have to push back against that.
Actually, sorry, yes, I agree. And a lot prettier too. So I apologize to Reese Witherspoon. Please, heartfelt apologies. Nobody should be compared to Rahul Gandhi. But so what happens is, Xi Jinping is a bit like Rahul Gandhi. He's very good. I mean, okay, so he's not even Rahul Gandhi because Rahul Gandhi is good for nothing. So let's say Xi Jinping is Reese Witherspoon, because Reese Witherspoon gets the guy, Xi Jinping gets the top post, and he makes himself, which is to say the guy, and he makes himself more powerful than anybody prior to him, including probably Mao Zedong. Which should have never happened. Deng Xiaoping left a lot of checks and balances in place to see to it did not happen. He was smart enough to break all of that. But like Reese Witherspoon, he has no knowledge of anything else. So he's taking them down that institutional ladder of overspending, which they resorted to in 2008 because of the global financial crisis. They started overspending on all kinds of things, which should have stopped, but it did not. So there's these two sort of institutional pushes plus Reese Witherspoon in the mix in China, which becomes very problematic for China per se, which is why there is no way that China can push itself back from the precipice. It is set on a confrontationist policy. It is going to get even more confrontationist. And for me, the real scary factor is when the bad debts actually come home to roost. Remember, they had gone bankrupt once before, and they got the West to buy up their shares left, right, and center. All these credit rating agencies and venture capitalists and hedge fund managers to buy up all things Chinese because they've corrupted the system. They may not get a second do-over because there's no money left in the West. What are you going to buy all these Chinese junk assets for? Especially now that we know, much more so because of social media, how junk they actually are. So this is going to be one thing that pushes Xi into increased aggression as things start biting back home.
That's very insightful, and as we are coming to the end of the first hour part of it, I wanted to touch base with you on one particular very, very important element from my point of view, and that is the role of the big tech media. We know what they are capable of doing. What do you think they are going to do, given Hunter Biden's suppression in 2020, and how Rahul Gandhi is treated, how up is written up in New York Times and other places? Suddenly, you see Kejriwal in New York Times, and and the anti-India forces that is led by so many. Rana Ayub is just one name, so many others. What will the international pressure affect the election scenario in India, driven by big tech? Sham.
I mean, it will have an effect. How large of an effect? I do doubt that the effect is as large as people sometimes make it out to be. It definitely does have an effect. I mean, the New York Times completely and utterly lost respect in the eyes of a lot of people once they posted the article by the head of a terror state in Pakistan, basically threatening India with nuclear war in that article. So, I mean, nobody really should take that rag seriously. And Washington Post, I add to that as well, and many other rags like that. But nevertheless, they do that not just in India, Vibhuti ji, they do the same thing in America as well. And this is not an original point that I'm making, but in any way. But this point has been made by many people, including people like Andrew Yang, that the media and the entire political establishment, whether on the right, whether on the left in the United States, is basically trying to make the people focused on issues that will keep them basically busy at each other's throats, rather than solving the real problems that exist in the country that go across political lines. You have the redneck guy from Texas who can't afford his insurance payments, who can't afford his house, who is hooked on Oxycontin and fentanyl, and can't send their kids to college. You have the same exact problem with the Black Lives Matter supporter in New York that is working a terrible job, making $10 an hour. Same exact problems are being faced by those people as well. So the problems being faced by Republicans and Democrats are much more similar than both sides want to let you know, because then you're like, okay, so these are actually issues where we can join hands and fight the problem together. But if you start to join hands and fight the problem together, then why do you need these establishment Democrats and these establishment Republicans for? That is the point that Andrew Yang has been making. I think it's a very valuable point, but the thing is, Andrew Yang has no institutional support, and he got completely dropped by the media since that institutional support dropped. So I doubt that Andrew Yang and his movement will get very far, because institutional support means money. So That's the same thing that they're trying to do in America. Keep the public at each other's throats so that the military industrial complex, big pharma, and the institutional politicians make hay. And that's what they're trying to do in India essentially as well. Because, for all the faults that you can see with the BJP government, with Modi, with the Hindutva movement, but you can't deny that the level of social cohesion that Hindutva has brought into Indian society, it's undoubtedly a positive thing. If you look at the BJP support base, if you look at the financial inclusion schemes, even if you may support them or you may not support them, but when I was in India recently, and I came after a very long time, and I was completely and utterly blown away that a nice Haldiram store in Connaught Place, to even the guy who is selling aloo chaat outside that store, they're both working on digital payments. Dono ke paas, they all have a phone. Scan the phone, you pay them via the phone. It's in terms of technology, in terms of financial inclusion, in terms of breaking down caste barriers, annihilation of caste within Indian society, these are all positive things that are happening under Hindutva. And it scares the establishment. It scares the establishment that wants these divides to be there, because this divide is what is making their government in Uttar Pradesh, that is making their government in Punjab, that is making their government in Tamil Nadu. So you have to fight against it, and then the media is a very good tool to use against that. So I think the trust in the media that is falling is rightly so. The alternative media that has come up on the internet, including the Jaipur dialogues and the work that you guys are doing, Vibhuti ji,
And your show.
it's just a testament to the fact. It's just a testament to the fact that people overwhelmingly have lost respect in the media, and its role is mostly destructive. And the more the media speaks, the more the more I truly believe that it helps the BJP. Every time the New York Times publishes an article, one more guy goes and votes for the BJP.
That's a wonderful observation. Listen, the issues are lots. This is not the first of the conversation. We'll have many more, and so please come again. But let's switch to the questions, because questions provide a lot of answers. So let's get to the questions. And as we say, keep your answers crisp and short. We can cover more and more questions. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen watching the show, please ask your questions to these wonderful, beautiful minds. Ishan Sharma, who and when had this blue, purple, and red states concept started, and which party did she belong to? Is Wall Street Journal also a liberal newspaper? Sham, would you like to comment on that?
I'm not entirely sure when the blue, purple, and red states concept started. I think it's essentially used to highlight the states that overwhelmingly or generally vote Democrat or generally vote Republican, and states that are swing states, like Texas is a trademark red state, California is a trademark blue state, and a state like Wisconsin or Virginia is a trademark purple state, or Michigan is a purple state. I'm not sure which party they belong to, whoever came up with this concept, but as far as I'm aware, the Wall Street Journal, I don't know if you can classify that as a liberal paper, like the way the Washington Post is a liberal paper, but I think they're a little bit more balanced than that. I don't know what Abhijit has to say about that, but whatever I've seen from the Wall Street Journal, at least in the United States, they lean slightly more conservative, at least as compared to the New York Times and Washington Post.
They are pro-business, and that's what makes them more centrist than leftist. So there's not a liberal thing. You want to add to that, Abhijit, quickly?
I don't see them being particularly pro-business. See,
Okay.
they're not challenging wokeism at all. Wokeism is the biggest bane of business today.
That's right.
It's very pro top management, because they can keep a system of they can keep a system of arbitrary fear in employees, because you never know what you're going to get sacked for because who you offend, and it keeps absolute third raters at the top, but it's not good for business and the shareholders, and Wall Street Journal keeps perpetuating this shit. So yes, they are a liberal newspaper.
Okay. I'm glad I asked you. We heard the other side of the view. All right. Next question, please. Ishan Sharma again. How can a Republican politician win a state like California, etc.? Or is it just impossible? Which parties will win the 2024 elections in both countries? Abhijit, you take the shot at this.
A Republican politician will win California when all the Indians crap in the Bay Area, when their children start scrubbing floors, when they become street cleaners, when they become pot washers, and when, despite getting 97% marks, they don't get admission into an American college. That is when California will turn. Before that, it is virtually impossible because it's become a uniparty state. Essentially, California today is what Venezuela was and continues to be. Thankfully, there are things that California can't do by itself. There will be a US Supreme Court, etc., to control it in a way that Hugo Chavez and co could not be controlled. But make no mistake, California is going down that path. What Venezuela is today, Venezuela's present is California's future.
And which party will you think will win elections in 2024 in both countries?
BJP in India. I'm hoping the Republicans in America, but given the general, mass retardation that seems to be affecting the American population, you can never be sure.
All right, thank you. Next question, please. Abhijit Sudhakar. Have you replaced Kushal with Vibhuti ji? Just because he's dark, you can't do this injustice, Sham.
Yeah, we have. We needed some more. See, Abhijit and I are, good-looking people, obviously. So we needed to maintain appearances. I felt like Kushal was really pulling the show down. So we needed to
and Kushal's
update
too
the
dark.
attractiveness of the show. Yeah, exactly. So the expenditure on light was way too much. So we had to cut down some costs.
All right. Thank you.
Like, they say BMW came up with pure black paint that can absorb all light. They actually copied. They took a photo of Kushal's skin and made it the new BMW.
Next question, please. Abhijit Sudhakar again. There is change happening in Edison, New Jersey. Sambit Patra came for India Day parade on 14th August. Thank you for your comment. Next, please. Shashank Sharma. What do you think of the Muslim radicalization situation in Bengal and Assam? Will it blow up after Census 23 or after 24 election? I leave it open to either one of you to reply to this.
I mean, don't you think that it's already blown up in Bengal, Abhijit? I mean, how much more can it blow up than it is already blown up?
See, the two states are very different. In Assam, the native Muslims do not like Bangladeshi Muslims. So, I know most native Assamese Muslims that I know are extremely pro-CAA. They don't want Bangladeshi Muslims settling on their land. So it's all about Assamese pride. So Assam isn't really the problem. You're looking at Bangladeshi or Bengali Muslim radicalization in Assam, which is really realistically the problem that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Bengal was it was gone long back. Yeah. Because remember, the same way the Democrats have their race replacement theory to win elections, or the way Justin Trudeau is working on immigration to create a permanent liberal majority in Canada, the communists were the first to do it. And Mamta doubled down on it. So there's nothing you can do about it. Bengal is probably going to see a second partition.
Interesting. Next. KJ. Who will become PM if BJP fails to cross 272 mark, but NDA reaches its cues to all panelists? Abhijit, any update on your Twitter case?
I don't know when the hearing is for. It's been filed, but I don't know when the hearing is for. Who will become PM if BJP fails to cross 272 mark? Very hard to say. Very hard to say, because what's been happening is that the strength of the BJP leadership, but also its weakness, was the fact that there were many centers of power there. So if one leader went, there were already 10 leaders to replace him. The problem now is that you've got one vote winner, Modi, and he's actually weakened the entire organization by bringing yes men in who there is really no face to replace him. The replacement fight seems to be between Yogi and Amit Shah, and Modi seems to be encouraging some kind of internal ticking between the two of them to fight, so that he doesn't have to go. So I doubt if there'll be anybody replacing Modi, even if they fail to cross the 272 mark. That said, they are going to cross the 272 mark. In fact, I think this time the NDA might actually reach a 2/3 majority, 330 for sure.
That's very powerful. You want to add to
The
that?
BJP alone, 330.
All right. You want to add to that?
I mean, I don't have anything to add. I'm just very happy to hear about Abhijit's confidence about 330. I'd love to see that.
Okay, good. I think many would like to see that. With NOTA, be regardless, there's something which I'll come back to you later on that. Run a day. Where do progressive women like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib fit in the larger picture of American politics? Will they be given important roles in the future? Sham.
I mean, they've been trying to get important roles in the future. The media has been trying to give them important roles in the future. There are sections within the Democratic Party that have been trying to give them important roles within the party, but ultimately the people speak, and the people outside of their very narrow constituencies do not like them. There's a reason why Rashida Tlaib is not going around the country delivering speeches for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. There's a reason why Ilhan Omar isn't doing it. Ilhan Omar does not go to Alabama or Virginia or Texas and deliver speeches in support of Joe Biden, because nobody there wants to hear her. Nobody there wants to see her. So if you do not have any attractiveness or appeal outside of your local constituency, you're not going to go very far. It's the point that Abhijit was making about the Aam Aadmi Party being successful in Delhi and Punjab, but not really growing anywhere else. Because the appeal that you have works for a state like Punjab that has this deep victimhood complex or has a certain demographic makeup, which is what Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib's advantage in Minnesota and Michigan Republic, in respectively. It does not work outside of those areas. So unless something drastic happens and the American public goes mad, which is not outside the realms of possibility, I don't see them getting major roles within the party.
Excellent. Next question, please. Reggie Pillay. Question to AIM. Bengal and Bihar fiasco is going to add seat losses to BJP in the East. Where can they cover the loss and retain the current majority in 2024?
Quite the contrary. I think Bihar is going to vote overwhelmingly for the BJP. Because see, all the anti-incumbency is going to be transferred to Tejashwi and Nitish. It is not going to go against the BJP. In fact, they're going to win a heck of a lot more seats in Bihar. Right. Bengal is a different matter, because I think the cadre got wiped out. Yeah. And what few cadre are left, it's going to take at least 15, 20 years to build the cadre back up in Bengal again. So I would place my bets on Bihar. Bihar, Chhattisgarh, these are the places where the additional 20, 30 seats will come from. Odisha, I rule out. I don't think they're going to shake Naveen Babu much. They have a particularly incompetent state leadership out there. So, and Naveen can run rings around them. So I don't think they're going to succeed there either. But Bihar, Chhattisgarh, that's where the big gains will come from.
Yeah, people underestimate the Hindutva in Bihar. I feel like because it's an underdeveloped state and because it's had Nitish as a leader and Lalu as a leader and not good viable alternative, they underestimate the Hindutva or even the street level Hindutva in Bihar a lot.
And I suspect they'll get lots of seats in Telangana, because in Telangana, for whatever reason, KCR has nominated them the opposition. He's kind of discounted everybody and he said, Yellow, you become the opposition. So anybody who wants to vote against me, please vote for the BJP.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next question, please. Sheikh Bake. War brings innovation. Do you think that that's why we see countries go on wars to reignite the old flame of Second World War innovations? Abhijit?
desperate wars bring innovation. Irrelevant border wars do not bring innovation. Too many wars absolutely stall innovation. So you're looking at things like, World War II that brought about innovation, or World War I that jump-started innovation. These aren't do or die wars. These are all elective optional wars. This is like your medical insurance. You'll have insurance for cancer and things like that, but elective surgery is not included out there. So this is like cosmetic plastic surgery or dental surgery or things like that. It neither pushes innovation. In fact, it takes away from innovation. Because remember, instead of fighting a big war, America is now focused on winning small wars. Most American innovation is focused on winning small wars, finding who is hiding where, etc., etc., etc. That is not a mistake that China is making. China is still way behind. That's a different matter. But in fact, these too many wars. And the classic example of this is Persia or Rome or Athens and Sparta. Too many small wars, and then you just go boom, one fine day.
One of the things that I read somewhere that, he talked about the small war, the regional threats have a way of expanding in unpredictable ways, and we know that. Right.
They
Next
expand bizarrely. They don't actually become big threats. I think the last regional threat to become a big threat was the Arabs in 600 odd AD. But other than that, other than pulling off, say, a 9/11, they don't really metastasize. I'm yet to see any minor regional threat metastasize to a mega threat.
Good point. Next question, please. Ravi's 7. How long do you think before it takes the woke ideology to become a potent political force in India as it has in the US, if ever? Sham?
I mean, I find it difficult, at least in the culturally, sure. For the culture war, it'll be great. For Twitter interactions, it's great. It has affected India in certain ways, particularly on university campuses. And then it does filter into local politics for sure. It is difficult to see how potent it will be pan-nationally, simply because India is a lot, I think, conservative society than certain Western countries. They're more religious. And so how much woke ideology really does affect them, it's difficult to be seen. But on college campus, it is a big problem. So it does filter into like research institutions and the education sector. So that's where I think the biggest damage that it can do, or it has done in the last many decades. That's where the biggest problem is. So you could say that it's a big political force in terms of the education and the media and college campuses. That's where its biggest hole lies.
Thank you. Next. Noob gameplay. Do you think liberal leftist Ford Foundation can bring a coup in our government, as lots of funded protests happened in previous year and is still going on? Abhijit, I also wanted to add to this. George Soros at World Economic Forum made a public statement that he was committing $1 billion to upend Modi and Hindutva in India. What's going on here? Can nobody do anything about it?
What makes you think our government isn't already a puppet of these foundations? Initially when the Modi government came, they banned the Ford Foundation. Then was it Caravan or India Today or Outlook that wrote the piece that, the American government called up some minister in the Modi government and they lifted the ban on the Ford Foundation. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was banned. How did they suddenly get back in? Nobody knows. So there's clearly some level of corruption or deep government infiltration that has already happened. You think your government is in opposition to Ford or Brookings or George Soros or things. Inside, the deep institutional capture has already happened. George Soros might want to create the impression, but I can honestly tell you George Soros probably has more chamchas within this government, within the PMO itself, then you probably realize.
That can be said also about the media also, international media also, right,
Of
Abhijit?
course,
Like they rail
of
against the
course.
international media all the time, but they're also very desperate to be published in the same international media.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely.
That's why the role of media becomes critical in that scenario. Thank you. Next question, Amir Nam Joshi. Why conservatives around the world, particularly in the USA, so meek and apologetic? They lack so much in retaliating to left's constant attack. Same in India. Who is more insufferable, AOC or Rana Iyer Mitra?
I don't know if the conservatives are meek in the United States. I don't necessarily see that. There are sections of the Republican Party that are that are very kumbaya, but I think American conservatives can hardly be called meek. I think European conservatives can definitely be called meek. British conservatives can definitely be called meek and like overly agreeable. I don't necessarily term American conservatives that way. Indian conservatives are definitely meek and agreeable. I would give that for sure. Even the trads act all hard. I really don't think they're that hard as they'll project themselves to be on social media. Sadly, the people that ask other people to do the dirty work for them are never going to get respect in my eyes. Um, so I think other than the American conservatives, the rest of the world's conservatives are actually a lot more. I mean, European and Indian conservatives are a lot more meek compared to American conservatives. At least that's my view.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uh,
Uh,
can I just
last,
quickly add to that?
please do. Please do.
See, I think there's two different issues out here from what you're saying, Amir. American conservatives aren't weak, but they are parochial. All right-wing movements and conservative movements tend to be local, whereas the left tends to be global, which is why you will always see an amplification of any left, even if the Timbuktu Popular People's Leftist Front raises a cry of genocide tomorrow, Rana Ayub and the New York Times will take it up. But if the Timbuktu rightist conservative party raises anything, nobody will give a shit about it.
Yeah.
You see this. So, for example, Douglas Murray is completely clueless about India's history.
Yes.
Jordan Peterson, completely clueless about India's history. In fact, Douglas Murray and Jordan Peterson are informed by Indian leftist historians about India.
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro is informed about Indian leftist historians about India.
Wasn't it Douglas Murray who said that the caste was even worse than what happened to the Native Americans in America?
To the British Empire. And that isn't all of it. They're quite clueless about their own history. So, for example, the guy who made this What is a Woman documentary, he actually said that, Canadians killing off Native Americans trying to convert them was very good because at least they found the grace of Jesus in their death. So, conservatives, and this is a very important point, read Manu Joseph's piece on this. He made this point about why the left is always global, powerful, amplified, because they have the same ideals everywhere. It's a cut, copy, paste everywhere. Conservatives are contextual and local, which is why they will never have global resonance anywhere. They will always be very, very contextual. So this is one thing where you think they're being meek. They're not being meek. They just don't open their mouths because they don't know what's happening outside their country. And Americans, I would agree with Sham, American conservatives aren't weak at all. Indian conservatives, on the other hand, because remember, they're the socially upwardly mobile middle class, they desperately seek validation. It is a trait of where they have come from. They have seen, growing up, they've seen Simi Grewal and co, and they desperately seek Simi Grewal's validation. They'd like nothing more. I'm telling you, even today, if tomorrow, if Simi Grewal or somebody like her, who were the big actresses in that generation.
See, what I said that on a show that I recorded recently, that these are the people that fundamentally hate the lady, the Maya from Sarabhai versus Sarabhai, the rich lady, but they would also give their right arm to be in the good books of Maya Sarabhai.
Exactly. And so Modi, he'd give Simi Grewal the Bharat Ratna if she tweeted even half of what she tweeted for, what was that man? Thackeray. If she tweeted even half of what she did for Thackeray about Modi, he'd give her the Bharat Ratna. Mark my words.
Thank you. Thank you very much for remarkable conversation on many, many issues. And, obviously, this is just the beginning of the preparation for 2024. But there is one thing very important. Conservative in democracy, it is very important to bear in mind that, democratic rights are unassailable rights. But what is important is that we have to work hard to protect and defend it. It's not just giving away the rights. You need to protect and defend. With these words, I want to thank all the viewers for your participation, viewing and asking questions. Subscribe to Jaipur Dialogue USA, and support. Press bell icon and come back again. As I always say, Satyamev Jayate.
Jesus saves.